In today's video, we're going to be looking at the new economy and what you should do about it. We've got a special guest in Lauren Whatevs who did a great article that we're going to go over from Marvel Snap Zone. There's some huge points in this article that get covered that I think it's really important that everybody understands. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. I want to cover some quick basics before getting into the interview just so you understand. Each week we get 4 spotlight cache types. All of them are series 4 and 5 cards, and these cards are handpicked by Second Dinner and have no set patterns. There are 3 featured and 1 random series 4 and 5 card. Each week there's going to be 1 new card, 2 specifically selected series 4 and 5 cards, and then a random series 4 and 5 card. If you own any of these, when you open it, then instead you get a super rare or rare variant type of that card. For the first 3, it's the exact same card. But if you get the random series 4 or 5 card and you have it, then the variant can be for another card. There is the caveat that during the season week passes, there's not a new card to put in these. So Second Dinner is going to pick a different series 4 or 5 card. These season pass cards are going to be delayed from adding to these lists for about 6 to 12 weeks per Glen. So if you already got a card, you could get a sexy variant. If you want to get all the variants for the ones that week, then you got to open more than 4 cards if you don't have them. We got a whole bunch of stuff to cover, so let's get into the interview. All right, Lauren, why don't you tell us where we can find you on your socials before we jump into this new economy and system?
Yeah, pretty much I'm only active, at least in the Marvel Snap community, at twitter.com/Lauren Whatevs, because Lauren Whatever was already taken. And then otherwise you can find my writing at Marvel Snap Zone.
Cool. Yeah, great stuff there. So make sure everybody goes to check that out. And like I mentioned in the intro, we are going to be looking at the new economy. Lauren put together a fantastic article over on Marvel Snap Zone. I highly recommend to go check this out. I will link it below. It'll sort of be our outline a little bit, but we're going to go over some questions to try to help everybody understand it, maybe even more. It is a somewhat complicated, yet in my opinion, somewhat simple system. You hear people talking a lot of negative, I'd say I've seen more of, and you do see some positive. And I think neither of us, and I'll speak for myself, I won't necessarily speak for you, I don't think we're necessarily apologists or defenders of Second Dinner. We just look at data and think like, well, what is it? Is that fair to say?
That's definitely how I feel. I've definitely gotten the critique that I'm a shill, but I just run the numbers. If the numbers told me it was bad, I would tell you it was bad.
I'm in the same boat. All right. So first thing that I'm going to ask, now we hear this a lot, is this new system sucks without too much of, because we're going to get into some details, without too crazy data details at this point. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I think first off, it does exactly what they said they wanted it to do, which is more cards for more people. As far as I can tell, it's more cards for everybody. There's not people at the high end or at the low extreme who are going to be hurt by the system.
I think that's fair, and based on what my initial looks are as well. And we're going to get into some pretty awesome graphs and tables that I think sum it up really well. So Second Dinner did say spotlight caches mean more cards for more players ever before, and you just mentioned it, and you think that's true based on your research, right?
I do.
Okay.
There might be a couple caveats, but yes, overall, I think that is safe to say.
So, and I was having some discussions on my Discord this morning about that topic, and we'll get to one of the downsides of it, but I do think everybody can take away at this point, given the pool size, and again, some things we're going to get into, that is, if you're going to stop the video right now, know that, right? And that's a positive. All right, so Second Dinner wants us to avoid hoarding. Now, I think most people think this system definitely encourages hoarding to an extent. Have you seen the data mine with the spotlight schedule? And do you think that Second Dinner will be able to keep each spotlight, basically each week, attractive, where somebody's going to go, hey, I'm not going to hoard too much? Like, what are your thoughts around that whole sort of dynamic of keeping them attractive and hoarding?
I think that they'll be able to keep it attractive just fine. Glenn talked about how the art team is really stepping up in order to be able to be outputting 3 awesome variants every single week. And then also most weeks we're getting a new card, which is always exciting. So I don't think they're going to have trouble making them attractive.
Yeah, I think, the weeks that might be soft could be those season pass weeks where obviously they won't have a quote unquote new card in there. But the one data mine that we've seen so far, I think it was Jeff that was shown as, I think I'll call it the replacement for the new card. And as far as a replacement for a new card goes, Jeff is pretty high end. So I think so far, so good.
Yeah, and I think those weeks, right off the bat, they're giving us a lot of big bad. I think that's to make the new system exciting. But in the future, I think the season pass week is when we're going to see big bads or super popular cards, things like that.
I think that makes sense. All right, so some people do not like that they can pull duplicates in this system because like I said in the intro before Lauren and I started, there's a set amount of cards in there. And one of the cards you can for sure, the random one, you can pull a duplicate and you'll only, quote unquote, only get a variant. Now, certainly some people don't like variants. Now, so this is sort of a two-part question. What do you think about this quote from Second Dinner related to including duplicates in the system? Because their concern there was they thought it might be too pay to win if they didn't do that. And then because complete players would be more quickly getting the new cards. And so the second part is, if you had to change this option, what would you change it to?
I like that question. I prefer to take them at face value. So far, I generally trust Second Dinner. Obviously, they're a company and they need to make money. But I don't think they would say that felt too pay to win unless that was at least one of the things that they discussed, right? It may also be about monetization and all that. I think that makes it a little bit too easy if a player who's at collection complete, I'm collection complete, if I can just open one spotlight cache per week and have a 50% chance of getting the new card, that's really good. And maybe too good for those players who don't care about variants. Yeah. But also, I don't know, like, do you need to punish your players who are collection complete? They've already put so much money into the game already, you know? Like, it gives them more room to buy variants or something, I guess.
I think that's fair.
I would change it, though. I think, and I've seen a lot of sentiment that rolling a duplicate feels bad. For me, it didn't really bug me because I was 100% expecting a duplicate. And I got 3099 Super Scroll as a replacement, which is a cool Super Scroll. But I've seen other people get Baby Black Cat, and that's like, that's not on the same tier as the three featured positions. There was an answer earlier that got corrected, where they said that if you roll a duplicate, then the premium mystery variant will definitely give you a super rare. I think that'd be one fix, not the best fix, but it would be better than rolling a 700 like regular rare variant. Yeah. My personal fix, I think that they should add a duplicate protection and make it so that the random card can't roll one of the three featured cards. That solves their problem of, we don't want it to be a 50% chance that you're going to get the new card. It's like, okay, well, the random one can't roll the brand new card or the other two featured cards.
Yeah. It sort of seems too simple. I don't know. I mean, am I missing? What are we missing there? Because that seems to me, everybody sort of wins there. Like you said, you don't want to punish basically the people who are the foundation of your game and supporting you financially, which, like you mentioned, is a business, and it has to happen. And for anybody out there who wants things to be too easy, if it's too easy, the game won't exist. They have to make money. And then you sort of don't want to punish the people giving you money. And now this is created sort of like, well, I think everybody sort of can win here. I don't know. Is that too easy?
Maybe it is. To me, it seems like they would have thought of it. You think about a player who's at 25% collection complete or 50% collection complete, and they have a 25 to 50% chance of rolling a duplicate. Like that, if they pull the random card.
Sure.
Take that as a given. Now, the random chance, 50% chance that you're not going to get a new card when you're missing half of them. That's kind of yucky. And spotlight caches should feel exciting every time.
I agree. And that's something that I'll probably touch on a little bit. Just everybody, including Second Dinner, has stated they want the game to feel fun. And obviously they got to make money, so you got to balance that a little bit. But there's got to be ways to make the latter feel a little bit more fun. And we'll touch on some of that, I think, as we go. All right, next question here. Is the biggest downside to the new system a loss of true agency for players to select which Series 4 or Series 5 cards that they want? You think that's the biggest downside?
I think that is sort of. That's in the direction of the biggest downside.
Okay.
People who are saying player agency is gone completely, they're wrong, because you can choose which week you're opening spotlight caches on. I think people need to think about spotlight caches as tokens. Like, it is a currency you are saving up to spend when you're ready to buy the thing that you want, right? Rather than something you open as you go. Of course, you can do that, and some people will do that. But if you think of it as 4 spotlight caches is the cost of a new card.
So similar to 6,000 tokens before, which was what you got in 1 month, right?
Exactly. And the acquisition is very similar. The time it takes to get 4 spotlight caches now is very similar to the time it took to get 6,000 tokens before.
So you could almost argue if that time it takes to do both of those is the same, there is no chance to get more than 1 per month. Whereas now there is a chance, say, you know, I mean, the worst case scenario is for it to be equal to what it was before, right? And now it's like, well,
Yeah.
in theory, the top end of that is you could nail the new card, the first cache every week. So in theory, you could quadruple what you did before. That's a fair argument, right? Again,
And on top of that, if you do get the same cost where it takes you 4 spotlight caches to open the new card, you also get 3 new cards or variants bonus.
Right. And that's sort of the way I'm starting to look at this. Again, shill comments be damned, but you know, again, looking at the data. So do you think that eventually people could catch up on the series 4 or 5 cards that they missed out on? I mean, you sort of started going there a little bit with your last statement.
Oh, right. I didn't get to why is it worse? It's the worst part is if you miss a card that you want, the wait for it to become available again is longer. Right. In the token shop, we have 1 card refreshing every 8 hours. So you have this constant chance of the card you want. If you're targeting Hitmonkey, Hitmonkey's going to come up eventually, and the token shop shows you every single card once before it shows you the next card twice. The new Spotlight system doesn't do that for multiple reasons. It has 3 cards refreshing every week, and only 2 on when there's a new card. Only 2 old cards are cycling in, and it's hand selected by second dinner, so we can't guarantee that there's going to be, you know, every card appears once before cards start showing up twice. In fact, I think we've already seen, doesn't Null show up twice before Hitmonkey shows up?
That's exactly right. And oddly enough, the video I think I did yesterday, I started trying to play with the prediction a little bit, and it gets tough to try to figure that out, but there's not a lot of cards to pick from. There's, I think, 25 between Series 4 and Series 5. So, I mean, at some point, some of these things are going to duplicate, and I think your point really holds true, is like the 8 hours versus the X number of weeks is really where it's going to feel, that agency selection, I think, is going to be felt. And I certainly get that. I think that if you were to play devil's advocate a little bit, it's the concept of, well, before with tokens, you were only going to get 1 per month of Series 5, let's call it. Now, with this system, you could get anywhere from, you know, 1 to 4 plus per month, depending on what you choose to do. So I think in that regard, that's, I mean, again, you sugarcoat it, that's going to be the part that makes you feel good about it. All right, so we were talking about the token system. How valuable do you think that the tokens are in this new system?
So token value goes up incredibly if you can spend tokens in a way that let you completely skip a week of opening Spotlight caches. So you can think of them as being equal. So if you're targeting a single card from the Spotlight cache, on average, it's going to take you 2.5 Spotlight caches to open it, to find that card, right? Equal chance of being in the first, second, third, or fourth one, take the average, 2.5. So that means if you can buy a card with tokens instead of opening it in the Spotlight cache, it's worth about 2.5 Spotlight caches. And that's pretty high value for tokens.
Yeah. Now, would you, and I might have this question listed later, but I feel like I got to place it in now. When you're going to spend tokens in the token shop, are you ever going to buy a Series 5?
I'm not. Okay. I'm gonna try my best to follow my optimized guide to show that it can work, I guess. The math tells me it works, so of course I'm going to do it. Series 4 cards in the token shop are half the price, but in the Spotlight cache, they're the same price as Series 5 cards.
Right.
So if we have 6,000 tokens and we buy a Series 5 card with that only lets us skip 1 week of Spotlight caches. But if we bought 2 Series 4 cards in different weeks, that lets us skip 2 weeks of Spotlight caches. So spending your tokens on Series 4 cards is going to be more valuable.
I would agree. And I think, and I'm not mathing this one, but I think even with the big bads, I would personally try to target weeks that has a big bad in it to try to save that. Am I off base there to save that 6,000 tokens? What are your thoughts?
I think you're exactly right.
Okay.
I don't want to tell people never spend 6,000 tokens on a card. If there's a card you're dying for and you don't have the Spotlight caches for it, or like we said, we don't know how quickly the rotation is going to be. Maybe Galactus, which so far looks like it's the first week of next month, maybe Galactus is going to take a while to show up again. In that case, if you're dying for Galactus, spend your 6,000 tokens.
Yeah. And I think that holds true with anything in the game or anything in life, really, is that you choose to do what you think is going to work for you. I mean, we're certainly here. I think you're probably in a similar mold as I do with some of these sort of concepts, is We're just trying to help somebody make a decision. At the end of the day, the people need to make the decisions for themselves. We hope that it's sort of a guide. This is what we think. This is what some data shows. You've got a different situation. Take all that data and make your decision on your own.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to answer like, how do you get the most cards? How do you maintain a full collection? But that ignores the fact that for some people, Galactus or Hitmonkey, examples we've already used, are the most valuable card in the game. In which case, get the thing that you think is going to be fun.
That's exactly right. Because it is a game after all. And if you're not having fun, then what are we even talking about?
Exactly.
All right. So we started alluding to this 100% collection. And I think you've made some mentions of saving per particular week. So talk about getting to that 100% collection, sort of the best way to get there. And I guess emphasize that concept that you can get 1 to 3 new cards per week, depending how they save their spotlights.
Yeah, that's actually maybe the best way to climb your percentage rapidly. I think the easiest thing is to just follow the system in an optimized way, so that don't open spotlight caches unless you can open 4 at a time. You guarantee it if you get unlucky. Stop opening them as soon as you get the cards you want. You can start saving spotlight caches for the next card and spending your tokens on Series 4 cards when that would let you skip a week of opening spotlight caches. Again, because we want to save them up. The last one is the one you kind of touched on, where it's like you could get as many as 3 new cards in a week. Actually, you could get 4 if the random card rolls in your favor. And that's going to be the best way to climb, is if you see a week coming up that has 2 or 3 featured cards that you're interested in, your spotlight caches go way further on those weeks.
Yeah. And people, especially the early game players, they're still going to get their Series 3 from the ladder climb. So I mean, getting new cards every month, and I haven't put together all my math on it, but they're going to feel, I think, pretty good about climbing to catch up. And we're going to get to the graphs and the whole rubber banding a little bit. But the idea is that it is trying, the system, I'll call it, is trying to pull everybody together to have similar collection percentages as much as possible. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, so let's talk about this a little bit. We talked about this offline a little bit on Discord and just generally. The importance of having a good pool size of Series 4 and 5 cards for this new system. Do you think Second Dinner explained this need for bigger? Well, first, that's the first part. And the second part is I'm kind of leading the question a little bit because I think I know your answer. But do you think that Second Dinner explained this well enough for the bigger pools, and if it could have helped with the reception of this new system?
They did explain it, but they probably didn't explain it public enough or well enough. Like if you're digging in the Discord answers, you can see it. You can see where they said, we need a big Series 4 or 5. That's the reason that we're doing flexible series drops, right? They announced flexible series drops and then didn't really tell us why. They said card acquisition improvements are coming, but didn't give us any more details than that. And so they've said, like, Spotlight Caches requires a bigger pool of Series 4 and 5 cards. But I don't think that was something that, like, I doubt the average player, especially casual players, has seen that anywhere.
Yeah, you really got to connect the dots, because the way, and I'll say we for now, unless you disagree, but the way we see this is that the pool size for Series 4 and 5 needs to grow to a certain number. Right now it's at 25, but it needs to grow for this new system to properly work. And if it grows too big, this new system won't work, right? So there's a fine number somewhere in there. Who knows what the number will be. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day will be the true judgment of this system, is where does that number fall? And then, like you mentioned, the flexible series drops versus the predictable ones. Hopefully once they get it within that realm, that we will start getting a little bit more predictable with the series drops, and it'll, quote unquote, I'll say feel good again. But I don't think that's been explained very well. One is, do you think that's sort of what the end goal is, basically reading all the tea leaves?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that they're targeting a number between 25 and 50. I just saw an answer from Glenn, a very recent answer, that said, we launched Spotlight Caches with like the smallest pool possible. So, which is that supports the fact that flexible series drops came out first, because they needed to inflate Series 4 and 5 before they could even launch Spotlight Caches.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, if the pool of Series 4 and 5 cards gets too big, then the system starts getting worse than the old system. It doesn't do more cards for more players anymore. So I think for sure there's a sweet spot in there they're targeting. Once they get there, series drops come back.
Yeah, and I think that should feel better. I'll never I'll say fault anybody for feeling upset about the agency a little bit, but I think your point that you made earlier is the token shop rotations versus the weeks. It's similar, but yes, the weeks are still bad. So I will never fault anyone for being upset there, but I think that if Second Dinner can really nail this proper spot, and hopefully it's like you mentioned, that number range there, and then we get back to the predictable, people start getting their Series 3. I know Spider-Man 2099, it was released, I think, roughly 2 months ago. And then he's already shown in one of the data mines for a Spotlight Cash week. So my hope is that that's going to continually be the case, like Echo's next week. Well, there's a chance that, Echo might not be in anything this month or maybe next month, but could be the first week after that. So you might only have to wait a month and a half again to try to get it. Now, is that too long? I don't know, maybe. But if you really want Echo that bad, you could spend tokens. Now, doesn't work with your system like you're talking about, like to follow it and be perfect. But if you're really that desperate, it's there. So any other thoughts about the pool size and the predictable versus flexible series drops?
I think it's worth mentioning that returning to series drops, it's still going to be flexible, but I think the quantity will be predictable, but which cards drop won't. It won't just be the oldest 4 cards dropping into Series 3, right? Yeah. Like, I hope it's not Darkhawk and Null. Of course, they're the examples right now. I hope they're not once Series 3 drops come back. But they could keep holding them into Series 4, right? There's no reason they couldn't.
Yeah. Let's put on the developer hats for a second. And again, we've mentioned that they need to make money. So there is got to be that balance of, keeping Snow Guard in Series 4 and cards like that, where nobody cares about the Spotlight caches, and just dropping the Nulls and the Darkhawks because that's the time they're supposed to be there. They've got to keep that balance. And I think, like you mentioned, that's where the flexible aspect comes in, where the number's going to be predictable maybe, but the card might not necessarily be. So that's on them to sort of figure out, all right, what's the most we can keep in Series 4 and 5 without upsetting our player base and keeping the Spotlight caches attractive. That's probably the sweet spot if I worked for Second Dinner that I'd be looking for. And that's probably where it's at, you think?
Yeah. The attractive thing is really important too, right? If Darkhawk and Null they're good cards, but if they just stay in Series 4 forever, eventually everybody's going to have a Spotlight variant for them. And, my Spotlight variant for Null might be different than the one that you get because they're going to be different each time they're featured. But if I have a badass Null variant, I don't really the next badass Null variant isn't exciting to me,
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't want it because you're like, well, I've already got this amazing Null variant that I want to build up and I want to foil or gold or ink or, crackle or whatever it is that you're going to go for it. And then if you get another one, you're like, well, okay, no, I got this one. So I definitely feel there. Now, we've talked about this a little bit, I think, but I have to mention this because I loved your quote. You mentioned in the article, saving up Spotlight caches and being selective about which weeks you open them is the solution. And if you've made it this far in the video, remember something like that. That is the solution. Saving up Spotlight caches and being selective about which weeks to open them is the solution. The quote further goes on to say, that's all it takes for Spotlight caches to represent lots of agency over your card acquisition. Is there anything you want to say to kind of expand about that? I know we've talked about it a bit, but I loved that quote and I wanted to see if you had anything further to say there.
Yeah, I think it's just keeping in mind that the Spotlight cache pool shrinks every time you draw from it, which means 4 Spotlight caches guarantee that you get the card. If you think about 4 Spotlight caches being the cost of a new card, then you're happy when you get lucky and it only takes you 1, 2, or 3. But if you're expecting to pay 4 every single time, it works an awful lot like 6,000 tokens.
Yeah, I agree. So now this is just me sharing this. I think I sent this one to you. So I typically do like to do opening videos. And I was doing one the other day after Spotlight caches came in. And it's just, I don't know why. It's enjoy, the flashbang and people like seeing it. But I had to admit, I stopped in the middle of shooting the video with the regular caches. I got Gene on my second Spotlight pool. So I was like, okay. And then I did a couple more and it was like 50 tokens, 150 credits, 50 tokens. And I was like, okay, this just feels terrible. So my question for you is, do you think they should buff those, I'd say, regular season caches at all? And what's the reasoning behind your answer?
I think at the very least, the 50 token fallback for drawing a Series 3 card when you're Series 3 complete, I think that needs to be changed. I've seen so much negative sentiment on it on Twitter, like just that doesn't feel good. Opening 50 tokens, and that's extremely small. It's what, like 1% of an ultimate variant.
It's feels bad.
It's bad, and even if it was 100, that would be tiny, but it's not. 100 somehow doesn't feel like the same slap in the face. I don't know what they do, because I don't know how you make credits and tokens exciting when they're so small and there's so little variance. But you don't want to get rid of the caches reserves altogether, because it can be exciting to open a new Series 3 card and that be random, or to open a new variant and for that to be random, often a pixel, but not always.
True, very true. And I think that's important to sort of focus in on, is this only really becomes a problem once you're Series 3 complete. Prior to being Series 3 complete, it still feels good. And this is something even prior to this system that I heard endlessly, is like, well, don't climb the ladder too quickly because it gets very boring after a while. And this was when we had the higher numbers. So I think you're right. I mean, when I look at this, I don't know the variant counting game, and I'm asking myself my own question here, but I think that the 50 feels terrible. I for sure look at, and again, without mathing this at all, that'd be a big part of it, but I definitely look at making that at least 100, and then maybe even the token reserve one 200, and hoping that doesn't break it. And then I'd hope I could go up from there. The credits also, I'd like to get at a minimum 250, and the other one maybe 300-ish, but I'd also increase the cosmetic reserve variant percent depending on the amount of variance in game, because I think getting a random pixel or random subpar variant from the caches feels way better than even, at least for me, 100 tokens. So yeah, given that those don't necessarily hurt Second Dinner outside of the fact that they have to make sure to keep up on their art, I don't know. That's where I go there. Having said that, how far off am I? You think that's reasonable or no?
I think you have to be careful with credits, because actually the new system gives you more credits than the old system does. Okay. People don't see that, but it's because there isn't gold anymore. So taking out the, was it 20%, 40%, whatever the chance of gold was, you now have a 100% chance of credits. And that adds up to, you get slightly more credits in the new system than you did in the old system. Okay. Do they reintroduce gold? I think that would be well received, especially after removing it. Yeah. Tokens, I think, could go up a little bit. I personally, I predicted in my article, this may be a future question I'm spoiling. I predicted that direct to Series 4 releases are going to stop. And I actually would go so far as to say they should stop. That is one way to tighten the system that doesn't feel too bad, especially because Series 4 and Series 5 cost the same in the Spotlight system. Yeah. And that's a way to make it so that tokens aren't so crazy valuable that you can get a brand new card with 3,000 tokens. So if they got rid of direct to Series 4 releases, then maybe they could ramp up the token prizes in the collector's reserves.
I could see that.
And then ultimately, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say, ultimately, I agree that increasing cosmetics is probably that's a good way to make them feel better again. You can make the currencies have bigger prizes, but not as many, and then give out more cosmetics.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And I think your points about credits being careful, it makes a lot of sense. And it would be great to get some gold introduced there, especially the free-to-play types. Now, again, the flip side of this is, well, what do you need gold and tokens for if you're getting more cards? And that's sort of where, that conversation versus agency comes in. So now, all right, we're going to get into some detailed stuff. So buckle up for anybody. I'm going to have some charts on screen here. Hopefully it'll help a little bit. I'm going to go to the chart that we have on your article here that hopefully can help some people here. We won't go through it maybe in too much detail, but my question for you, talk about the collection rubber banding to 80%. Can you help explain this a bit and why this might be either good or bad?
Yeah, so a really good player, Equinox, reached out to me with this idea for the gravity chart, and I loved it, which is part of why it ended up in the article. But I know from personal experience that it's hard to understand at first glance. So I'm with you if you're there. I will try to explain it as Equinox patiently explained it to me. And once it clicked, it was like, oh, this is awesome. This makes so much sense. It's a great way to represent how the system works in the long term. Yeah. So here we're covering 3 seasons, because every 3 seasons, one of them is a 5-week-long season rather than a 4-week-long season. So we want to represent that you're getting 3 season pass cards over 13 weeks rather than over 12. There's that. But what's cool about this chart is it scales up kind of forever. Like the percentages work if this chart is covering a year or 5 years, assuming the system continues to work the same way. The percentages are scaled. The gravity line, that purple dotted line that you see, dashed line that you see, it represents the amount of cards you need out of the new cards coming to stay at your current completion of Series 4 and Series 5 cards. So over a 13-week period, if you're going to maintain 100%, you have to get 13 cards. If you want to maintain 0%, you have to get 0 cards. And then there's every number in between. So that's the line that's just like maintenance. I think that maintenance is a good way to think of it if you don't like the gravity line. I didn't want to step on Equinox's toes because she loved the name gravity line. And it's accurate because it represents the intersection that you get with the gravity line represents what percentage you're pulled to, right? So gravity, whether you're under it or over it, you get pulled to it. Mm-hmm. So here we have charted each system based on what percentage of the Series 4 and 5 cards you have at the start of the 3 season period. How many cards are you going to get using that system? Specifically, how many Series 4 and Series 5 cards are you going to get? Right. And then, as I already alluded to, where the system crosses the gravity line, that represents the percentage that you will be pulled to. So we can look at the old free-to-play system. That's the dotted pink line. It crosses at like 60%, 65%?
Yeah, just a little bit of, right around there.
So if you have less than 60% of 65% of Series 4 and 5 cards, you're going to be pulling in towards 65%. If you have more, you're going to get pulled down to 65%. And that's how the old system works. And you can see by comparing new system lines that the intersections are much higher, which represents getting more cards, specifically more Series 4 and Series 5 cards.
So can I jump in for 1 second here? Because I think this point is huge. So this is the part where everything clicked in my brain, is when I figured out that point was, so the old system here is this dash line, whether you're free to play or a season pass spender. Obviously, any more money is better. Then, so take these new dotted lines. Let's just stay for free to play for a second. So old system dotted line, new system dotted lines. Regardless of the system, all 3 of these dotted lines cross this gravity line at higher points than the old one, which means it's better. Same thing for the spending system. The solid line here, it crosses the gravity line here. All 3 solid lines cross further. And to me, and you correct me if I'm saying this wrong, is when I recognize that, that's when I go, well, this is clearly better. This system is better for as far as card acquisition goes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And that's exactly why this gravity chart was my opening salvo, even though it is hard to explain, because it shows you, once it clicks, it shows you every new system line is better than the old system.
That's right. That's the way I look at it. It really sort of, I don't know. I like it. So sorry, I interrupted, but continue sort of going through it.
It's hard to know how much to cover, right? Like, do I cover why the old system dips at the end? It's because you start running out of Series 4 cards to pull, right? Yeah. Like, you don't get them from the collection track anymore, and the system starts getting significantly weaker because the old system had no way to guarantee you would pull a Series 5 card from the collection track. I climbed 9,500 CL and never got a Series 5 card from the track. So that's where that big dip comes in. I think one of the most interesting points is that solid white and solid blue line cross at higher than 100%.
Yeah.
Which means the season pass is all you need to get 100% if you're optimizing the new system correctly.
Which to me is pretty amazing. Again, it goes back to the problem seems to be more depending on how you view your agency. So I personally absolutely love this graph. At first, I did look at it and got a little cross-eyed, trying to understand gravity, You know, I consider myself semi-decent with numbers, but at the same time, I'm also a person that's like, hold on, explain this to me 4 different times, please, so I can finally grasp it. And I just, again, a big shout out to everybody who contributed to this. I think it's an amazing. So you guys did a great job.
Yeah. I want to note for my haters, this graph does not recognize predictable series drops, right? So if you consider that in the old system, you would be getting essentially free Series 4 and Series 5 cards by waiting for them to drop to Series 3, right? If you owned, let's say you own 50% of Series 4 cards, then you own 50% of the ones that are dropping into Series 3. So over 13 weeks, 13 cards drop into Series 3, you get half of them. That pink line could be 6.5 higher to represent the cards that should be Series 3 in the old system, but aren't because of flexible series drops.
Yeah. Now, I do think, though, at some point, like we mentioned earlier, they're going to have to start getting those drops in there where it becomes more predictable. So that would be my counter to your quote unquote haters on this. It's like, okay, so right now, yes, this feels bad, but eventually it's going to potentially go back. And I think, and maybe I'm off base there, but that's how I sort of look at this is right now it feels a little, but I think in the long run, eventually when they start doing those more predictively, I think people are going to feel decent about it. But I don't know. I've been wrong before. I did like Kang a lot, so I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. This chart, I can't just go in and inflate the number by 6.5 because all of a sudden you're introducing Series 3 cards and that breaks the relationship where the percentage is describing Series 4 and Series 5 cards.
Yeah.
So it's just, I'm working on a solution. You know, I needed some recovery time. I sacrificed a lot of sleep to get this article out on time.
I bet.
But I'm working on a solution that can account for series drops. But also, I think it's ultimately a moot point because I can't imagine that series drops aren't coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree. It has to go there. So there's a lot of talk about how new cards are easy to get, which is true if you save up spotlights. But once you run out, then the amount of credits you need to guarantee the new card is like 24,000, right? It's like a month's worth of credits, right? So what do you say to the people who are sort of worried about something like that?
I'm going to say that's the same thing as tokens, right? Like 24,000 credits sounds like a lot, and it is, but we were raking in, or we now get 24,000 credits around the same speed that it took to get 6,000 tokens in the old system. Yeah. So
it's okay. Don't stress too much, basically, is long and short of it.
If it's bad now, it was just as bad before.
Okay. That's probably a better way to say it. I agree. So towards the end of the article a little bit, I made a question here. It sounds like there's no one strategy to rule them all, and it depends on your collection a little bit. And I really like the charts that you kind of put at the end. It really, to me, summarizes everything really, really well. So I guess in simple terms, how would you approach the new economy for a new player? And then I'm going to ask for a 50% and a 80 to 100%. So if you want to just go one by one.
Honestly, the answer is kind of the same for everybody. It's using those optimizations I mentioned before, right? Mm-hmm. And the wrinkle that gets added if you have under 100% collection level is it is much better. It's a much better use of your spotlight caches to go for weeks where you are missing 2 or 3 of the featured cards. So we talked about before how it's a 2.5 spotlight cache average to get the 1 card you want. If you want 2 cards, it's 3 1/3 average spotlight caches, which sounds higher, but you're getting 2 cards, right? So you cut that in half. And then if you want 3 of the featured cards, then the average number of opens is 3 3/4. But again, you divide that by 3, and now it's 1 1/4 spotlight caches per card that you want.
Which is great.
Yeah, that's a really good deal. And that's why when you look at the gravity chart, that when you have a lower percentage, your Series 4 and Series 5 card acquisition is huge.
Yeah. So regardless of how you're looking at it, whether you're a new player, 50%, 80%, all that, you take that approach and it's sort of good to go. All right, so I want to jump back to the gravity chart for just a second here and talk about the season pass. Can you sort of, after looking at this and studying everything you've studied, tell me how valuable you think the season pass is basically in general, not just with new card acquisition, but how it can help you improve everything with the new economy as well.
Yeah. The season pass has always been the best value in the game, as far as, bang for your buck for the cash, the things you can buy with cash. And it's only better now. Part of that is a guaranteed card it's not just like, a guaranteed card is another week where you don't have to open spotlight caches, right? Like, they're gonna try really hard to make season pass weeks exciting on the spotlight cache, but if your collection complete, which I know is a small percentage of players, but if you're there, you don't have to open any spotlight caches that week. Like, you got the new card with your credit card instead of spotlight caches. So that's one way that it's better. But then the other way is gold. There's gold on the season pass track, the paid one. And then there's also the new weekend missions that reward gold if you have the season pass card. So that extra gold acquisition makes the season pass even more valuable than it was before.
I agree. I agree. And if you're spending or you have hobbies in general, I say this in any of my offer review videos, obviously keep within your budgets. But if you can spend $10 US on a hobby per month, that's typically very, very affordable. So I would highly recommend spend on this. It, one, helps support the game. Two, makes your experience way, and I should probably reverse that order, but it makes your experience way, way better in game as far as card acquisition.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we went over a lot of the stuff in the chart. I think it generally makes definite improvements. We've gone through a whole bunch of stuff at the bottom here as far as showing the different scenarios. One of the notes I've got written here is basically like what to do if you want a spotlight variant. You basically buy the new card with your tokens first, and then you open the spotlight caches. I mean, that's more for a cosmetic type person to do, correct? I mean, that's that strategy.
Yeah. If you, that is, if you want the spotlight variant and you don't have the card yet.
Right.
You save yourself 4 spotlight caches by not having to empty the prize pool and then start pulling from the second prize pool.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the biggest thing that, and we're getting towards the end here a little bit, but don't just randomly open your spotlight caches. I think you mentioned this towards the end of the article as well, is like plan ahead. Now, certainly if you want to just open them, go ahead, but understand that is not optimizing the system. You are going to potentially fall behind, correct?
Yeah, and you can see it on the gravity chart. I don't know that you need to pull it up again, but there's a huge gap. Actually, I was noticing on your screen, maybe you should pull up the gravity chart. I was noticing on your screen that the bottom line isn't properly labeled. The bottom line represents opening your spotlight caches as soon as you get them.
Oh, okay.
So the gap between the greens and the white and the blue is I am saving up my spotlight caches. I am targeting them. I am using strategy. The green lines represent opening up spotlight caches as soon as you get them. And you see it's still better than the old system, but it's a lot worse than optimizing them.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. So blue's strategy, green just open, as soon as you get them. And you can see very easily that the blues are dramatically better. Well, dramatically, There's a gap.
Blue and white are both strategy. And one of them is if you're spending your gold on refilling your missions, in other words, converting them to credits. And one of them is converting them into tokens with Token Tuesday.
Okay. Good deal. Good deal. So try and open spotlights on weeks where you get multiple cards if you want them. We mentioned before, it's okay to skip. If skipping is better to use on gold. So this is actually something I want to ask you about. Token Tuesdays. Where are you at with Token Tuesdays with this new economy, given the gold? Do you buy every one with every gold you get? Or, I mean, where are you at with that?
Yeah. So.
And actually, one more thing, throw in comparing to credit refreshes that you just mentioned as well.
Yeah. In the old system, the difference between mission refill or just buying credits. Mission refill is a little bit better because then you get season XP also. The difference between mission refill and Token Tuesdays was very small. It's actually why tokens got dropped off of the graph for the old system, is because it got you like 0.2 more cards per 13 weeks, like negligibly better. In the new system, the token value has gone up so much, especially if you're buying Series 4 cards to skip a week of opening spotlights. That value is so much higher that converting your gold into tokens is significantly better than converting your gold into credits. So Token Tuesdays, I think, pull you almost to 110% on the gravity line. And obviously you can't go higher than 100.
Yeah.
But the higher the system's gravity intersection is, if it was 120, that's pulling you up to 100 a lot stronger than 105. So Token Tuesdays are definitely a very good use of your gold. Of course, there are bundles every now and then that have an even better token to gold ratio.
I'm gonna switch my screen and wonder about this for a second. Like Cosmic Wildfire? I mean, yes, no, maybe?
Yes. Cosmic Wildfire is an example of one that has an even better token to gold ratio than the Token Tuesdays we're seeing now, which are 1,400 gold for 1,000 tokens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to pull that one up real quick. Need to pull the trigger on that one myself here real soon. I was actually waiting until we had a chat.
If you saved up that much gold.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, I've been a little bit of a hoarder. I've got like 19K. So I think I'll be pulling the trigger on that one for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So
it's the best one we've seen in a while.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I mentioned this in a separate video, but it's one of the last gold for token offers for the next few months. So for me, or at least at a good ratio. And so that's where I was like, I really probably should pull the trigger here. So one of the things, again, we've talked about it. I've got these charts here at the end. These really sum it up best in my mind for anybody who just eyes glossed over, whatever. Go to these charts at the end and just straight up look at the numbers and look at where you see more or less of whatever you're looking at. That's the thing that I think you're going to look at. And when I look at this, I think the quickest summary of this is less currency, but more cards. Is that fair?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So we got a couple things here before we get out. You have some predictions here. We've touched on a little bit already, but I wrote down series drops, no more direct to series 4 releases, which you touched on. Ultimate variants becoming cheaper because of Mystic variants. Anything you want to expand on those 3 topics at all that we might have not touched already?
Another reason that I think Ultimate variants are getting cheaper, it's not just the impending Mythic variants whenever those land, but it's also, Mythic, likely that we know that all Spotlight variants are going to eventually be available another way. They've said, I think it's a 6-month minimum where they are timed exclusives for Spotlights, but then they will enter another system. And they've said, we're looking at different places for them to go, including Ultimate variants. And I think that's where most of them are going to go because they are meant to be these top tier variants. So if you're all of a sudden flooding the pool of Ultimate variants with 3 new ones per week, 5,000 tokens for an Ultimate variant gets ridiculously expensive. Yeah. I mean, it already is, but when you have that many being added to the system, I think that they could easily get away with making them 3,000 tokens.
I would tend to agree with you on that. The pool grows so large where it's like, well, there's too many of these. I can't keep spending on this nonstop if they keep coming in like this. So the last point that I want to bring up, it's an interesting one I found in the article, was that your biggest concern, and maybe it's changed a little bit, but in the article you mentioned that this new system could actually hurt second dinner too much in the pocket. And that's the part that I intentionally saved this for last because maybe I should have this at the beginning, but I just thought that was so interesting. I want to hear more about this if you could expand on it.
So it's maybe funny because that's mostly coming from a place of fear of change, right? Which is exactly what this article is pushing against. Like, hey guys, look at the math. It's not bad just because it's different. Yeah. And then I'm over here like, my concern is not for second dinner, if that makes sense. Like I didn't word that very well. I've since updated the final paragraph, or the final few paragraphs a little bit. My concern isn't for their welfare. I mean, of course, I hope that they do well enough to continue developing the game I love. Yeah. But the concern is for us. Like if this system does not monetize well, then they're going to push monetization back towards pay to win instead of this new big push towards cosmetics.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because I know a lot of people have been screaming for they don't want it to be pay to win. And I mean, I'll get called a shill, but as far as other mobile games, this is about as non-pay to win as you can get out there. Not that necessarily needs to be the line, but still want to get towards cosmetics so it feels fair and everybody's just playing based on skill. So I know for anybody out there, encourage those rich whale friend Krakens, etc., to be interested in those cosmetics so that we can have a system that does help second dinner and the game thrive so that we can all sort of play and have fun together. I just really wanted to talk about that point a little bit because I did think, some people might think, well, you care about second dinner. It's like, it's not about that. It's about keeping a system that's good for us in the long run so that we don't go to a more pay-to-win system because at the end of the day, I think it's Newverse that probably funded the game or has a game. They need money. They need money. And Second Dinner is going to be there trying to create a game for us that we're having fun at. But at the end of the day, they've got to pay those bills and pay off their venture capitalist investors and all those sort of things. So I appreciate everything that you've done in this article. Again, shout out to Corrales, shout out to Equinox for also helping. I don't know. I mean, only you know all those specific things. But what else? Is there anything else you want to expand on the article? Shout outs, anything like that you want to mention?
No, I don't think so. I will be updating it. I said in it that it's a living article or a living guide, living document, whatever, living. I will be updating it. I already updated it just a tiny bit to talk about how the conversion to Spotlight caches actually happened. Like before that update shipped, it was a prediction and now we know. Yeah. There will be some fixes. Like the table you're looking at right now, I actually had the wrong percentage of gold in in reserves in the old system. So the gold should actually be a little bit higher for gold.
Okay.
Corrales knows he's going to update the charts, and we'll fix the article. Somehow, I don't know how. Somehow I'm going to try to address predictable series drops.
Well, and hopefully we'll get some more information on that in the future as well. I mean, I think that could help. I think ultimately at the end of the day, even if there's a % off here or there, you can still get the good feel of the system. And I think you did a very, very good job. So make sure to pat yourself on the back for it and feel good about it. Whether there's haters out there or not, like you said before, and I'm sure many times, is you're just trying to present the data and that's it. So yeah. I appreciate everything you do. We want to shout out one more time where everybody can find you.
I'm at Twitter. The name is Lauren Whatevs.
All right. Well, thanks again for spending time with me today. Very much appreciate it. I'm sure we're going to be talking a bunch in the future. If anybody found this article and discussion helpful, please consider hammering down that like button. Go check out Lauren on Twitter. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye.